Leaving the corporate world, starting my own business, I realized, wow, I could have used so many of these tools in my roles. Had I known, nobody ever taught me. It wasn't encouraged within the company. It almost feels like a nice to have instead of an actual strategic decision. Even the words personal development are considered luxury. We don't pay for your personal development. We pay for your professional development. But the kind of work that I do helps you be the strongest leader. And when we think about it, as we're looking at cost saving, we're increasing retention and also lowering the cost of what it takes to hire that higher level leader, because that recruitment is a costly process. You're developing a talent pipeline. Just like anything when it comes to business, you want to make sure that you have business to replace if you lose business. It's the same exact thing with your people. We're looking at how to be successful without burning out.
Welcome to the Care We Need podcast, where we bring together patients and providers to explore how we can improve U.S. health, wellness, and human services systems to better serve the growing population living with complex illnesses. This podcast is brought to you by Bennis Companies, where we provide education, consulting, technology, and other resources to help health and wellness professionals streamline their systems, enhance their collaboration, and deliver better health outcomes for their clients. With us today is Jackie Roby, founder of Inspired Journey Consulting. She's an international speaker and executive leadership advisor who develops high potential talent and readiness for C-suite executives and advocates for people-first organizations that can thrive in any market. Her work focuses on strengthening emotional intelligence, clarity, and sustainable leadership at the highest levels.
I am an executive leadership advisor and peak performance strategist. A lot of fancy words to say that I am developing high potential talent for C-suite readiness. I'm looking at the inner game of how we're operating, because we are taught the skills, right? But there gets to be a point in your career where you're just working hard, and yet plateauing. And why is that? So I'm helping to create this shift within so that you can start thinking strategically. And we do that really operating from lowering that survival mode. And when I think about
kind of like a professional athlete coach, but for C-suite executives.
Yes. And for people who haven't made it to the C-suite yet, right? For the people who are just right there, but they're told, oh, you're not ready yet. But they're doing so great and they've got these great performance reviews and they're loyal and everybody loves them. But what comes next? Getting them to that next level.
Everyone loves them, but no one promotes them.
Exactly.
So what started you on this track? What got you interested in this, and how did you start? What got you started in this?
My passion for mental wellness came into play almost 20 years ago when I fell into my first depression. And it changed me. I didn't know anything about it. I never had anyone in my family talk to me about depression or anxiety or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, all things that I live with. It took my breath away and honestly had me on the floor most nights. And I just was trying to survive every day. And so it sparked this interest in my own healing journey, but then taking it to the next level and saying, okay, it's not just my mental health, it's also my mental wellness. There's choices that I need to make each day. That changes how I show up in this world. And eventually, leaving the corporate world, starting my own business, looking back, I realized, wow, I could have used so many of these tools in my roles had I known, but nobody ever taught me. It wasn't encouraged within the company, any of the companies that I worked for. And the people I talk to, it almost feels like a nice to have luxury instead of an actual strategic decision.
Personal development?
Yes. Honestly, even the words personal development are considered luxury and they're knocked off of the line item. We don't really need that. We don't pay for your personal development. We pay for your professional development. But professional development is only seen as something maybe within your industry to take you to that next space. Maybe it's a networking thing. Maybe it's a conference, an organization that you're joining. Maybe, just maybe, they'll pay for you to go to a leadership course or take one of those asynchronous ones, right? And the list of thousands of courses you have access to. But the kind of work that I do helps you be the strongest leader.
It sounds almost like you're you're dealing with a mindset that is short-sighted in a way where we're willing to make the short-term investments to affect the bottom line. But what you're doing is saying, let's actually extend that view outward a little bit. What would happen to our bottom line? What would happen to our mission if our people were able to operate at a higher level?
Exactly. Exactly. And
Mm.
when we think about it, as we're looking at, let's say, that short term desire, right? Cost saving or revenue bottom line benefit, we're helping to eliminate or lower the turnover, right? So we're increasing retention and also lowering the cost of what it takes to hire that higher level leader, because that recruitment is a costly process. Wouldn't it be better if we looked within and found the people that have been there, that have been loyal and supporting, and they just need these new lessons to get the next step?
I've heard that come up quite a bit
Mm.
of the benefit of hiring externally versus internally. And I can see there being a little bit of back and forth on why that would be. But what you're saying is that invest in your people, and then you won't have to look for anyone else, that they will already be in your organization.
Exactly. You're developing a talent pipeline. That's the goal. Just like anything when it comes to business. I spent 20 years in sales and marketing, and you always talk about building your funnel, always having three more waiting, three more leads waiting. You want to make sure that you have business to replace if you lose business, if things change in the economy. It's the same exact thing with your people.
Mhm.
It costs
And
less
people are
money.
spending a ton of money. Yeah, I was just going to say people are spending a ton of money to bring in new talent, but that doesn't, if you were to just take that budget and develop your people, you would, like you said, higher retention. You would develop your pipeline for leadership, all of that. You'd be investing in your company's future by investing in your people's future.
Exactly. And the way I look at this is not only is it supporting all of those other aspects, but it's also helping the mental well being of the people that are there. So then you think about what that can decrease in terms of insurance costs
Hmm.
and what an expense that is for companies as well, because we're looking at how to be successful without burning out, without wear and
Yeah,
tear on your body.
I could see this being a, a, a little bit difficult for someone who's not trained in wellness to kind of parse out, but I can absolutely see the line there of people who are more stressed or who are not developing or are happy in their career. They don't feel like they're going somewhere. Then they start declining internally, whether it's through their thoughts, psychology, and then that leads to biochemicals in their body that are like high cortisol or depressive biochemicals. Can't bring them into mind right now, but all of those things affect that person's physical health, which down the line affects their ability to show up to work or affects how long they can work or affects all of those things. So what you're doing sounds like is educating leaders, or no, do you educate leaders on developing their people, or do you specifically educate the leaders themselves and then them developing their people as an after effect?
Great question. I would say it's probably a combination of both, because I'm working to help them develop their leaders, right? To develop the talent. But there is an education process that comes into play. Oftentimes, when I go into a company, I'm starting with speaking, I'm offering a workshop, and that's how we get to know each other. So maybe it's for the executive team. It could be happening at one of their retreats, or it is the employee resource groups that we're working in. The learning and development team tend to be very attracted to what we're talking about here. And so the workshops create a space of education and understanding, and also learning how to implement things in a very reasonable way. And then we look at the talent pipeline later.
So what does a typical workshop look like?
So, for example, one of the ones that's very popular is From Overwhelmed to Overjoyed. And we spend, anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes going through what this looks like and helping to identify things that are going on within you that are signs that it's happening, and then tools to shift. We're never going to be able to prevent these things. We can minimize, right? But our brain is doing a lot of work and it's just going to do its thing. But we can work to build new neural pathways towards more calm. And as we're paying more and more attention to our body in these moments, to our thoughts, and we become more self aware, we can then use mindfulness to create change. And the more we do that, the stronger that new pathway becomes.
So typically these workshops involve developing leaders in a company, the C-suite or the higher ups see like these are some up and coming leaders, or some of their C-suite team needs to be developed, or they see the need in their culture. And so they bring you in and you work on an individual level first. How do you begin to thrive as an individual working in this company?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious, do you experience much pushback? I know that there tends to be certain types of people who work in certain types of organizations, and I relate it to the military, where just shut up and color, or just go. We need to drive, and like you mentioned earlier, that the personal development kind of gets put to the side. What kind of reception have you received from these types of organizations? People who are known to be very like hard driving individuals trying to make make their next promotion, all of that stuff. How have they received your coaching on personal development and personal wellness?
Yeah. Well, I would say I position it for them as professional development because that's what it is. And the industries that I tend to work the most with are actually male dominated industries because I specialize in helping women of color in these spaces. But I've been most surprised by is the men that come to me.
Hmm.
I have found that there is a need and a desire for the help. And being in spaces with them, they've shared the tough times that they can't tell anybody and how important that is. And I would say when I look at the pushback, usually the big pushback is actually something that any individual in any space often says, which is, I don't know if I have time. And when you're in the space of grinding, the hustle of it all, that's often the message you're telling yourself. Like you said, I need to work, I need to get this project done, I need to get the next promotion. So you're telling yourself you don't have time. What I do is I help them to find even just 10 seconds of time. How are we going to fit this into your day? And let's look at how it translates into the next conversation, the next meeting that you have, the next deadline that comes up. Because the science behind it is when we do this work, minimum of 15 minutes of mindfulness a day, after 8 weeks, you can get an MRI scan and see the change in your brain. You're actually having a quicker connection to your frontal lobe, to your prefrontal cortex, so that you can have better productivity, more innovation, clearer strategic decisions, plus calm and happiness.
So you tie it to actual measurable results in a way down the line. This is what happens when you make the investment every day, when you do the discipline every day. It reminds me of something that it's a little bit on a different topic, but I feel like it's very relevant, is the dynamic that I've seen of people who are in survival versus thriving mindset, and the element of dreaming, the element of hope, where people who are in a surviving mindset, where they're just trying to make it to the next day, they're just trying to make enough money to be able to feed their family, or people who are not in that situation, but maybe in their heart, in their subconscious, they're still there. And I know in myself, I come from a very like working blue collar background, and you see this a lot where people are just focused on just get to the next day. Like everyone's looking forward to Friday because everyone hates their job, but everyone goes to their job because they need the money, and it circles. And people in that place, whether you're actually living paycheck to paycheck, or whether you're just kind of mentally there, even though you're making plenty of money, or you're making like you are well off fiscally, everything going on there, but there's a mindset, perhaps, that a culture, and I think that's happened not only on the individual level, but I think American culture as well. I think there's a certain amount of it comes from the pioneering days, or even just the immigrant culture, which is across America, like everyone in America is an immigrant to some level, and it just depends on how many generations. Obviously excluding the Native American community, but um, and there's something that happens psychologically when you come here and you have to work to survive. And when you, perhaps for those who've been in a different country where it's a much older infrastructure, much older economy, much older people, perhaps can develop a different mindset. But for the people who come over, the immigrants who come here, and then they have to work in order to get to the next level, and then even taking it back to the pioneer days where people are traveling across country and they have to, like, everything is on them or they will die. Like, there's a culture that's developed because of that. And I think some of this work, 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 grow, 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 we gotta go or we'll die type of mentality that comes in business. I think some of it comes from that. There's vestiges of survival mindset in our very culture. And what you're doing, it sounds like, is you're working to kind of break off the crust on that culture, on that mindset. What culture is to an organization, a soul is to like brain and wiring and all that stuff. The psyche, I should say, is to the brain wiring. What you're doing is on both. You're kind of breaking off the crust, and let's peel that back and say, what actually do you need right now, and how can you actually build towards something in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
100%. You said so much there that resonated and purely aligns. We are taking people out of survival mode. That's the point. And what we've experienced as a country in this capitalist society is hustle to the core. This need for not just achieving, not just overachieving, but like hyper achieving, always being on, always performing, always on to the next. And it wears and tears on us, but we're so used to it. We have been conditioned. And for generations, this has gone on. So there's an imprint on us. If you think about those of us who are Gen X or older millennials, we have built through our own experiences the opportunity to have things like mental wellness days. So the younger generation is really benefiting from that. But yet, our generations are like, ooh, can I take them though? We built it, but we're still so conditioned from what we've experienced to even care for ourselves and say it's okay. So there's a lot that we have to decondition. And it's difficult when the environment around you, the country around you, operates differently than that.
I remember growing up in the environment that I did, there was a certain nobility ascribed to, specifically in my background, a man who basically is willing to go kill himself to provide for his family. And that is an absolutely amazing thing in certain contexts, as in someone who's willing to make the sacrifice because they're surviving, because they don't have food on the table, because all of that. But when recognizing a noble sacrifice then becomes the goal, it locks you into a circle. It locks you into a pattern where you never escape that, because that's what was necessary has become the goal, and they can't grow beyond it.
And when you're in that loop, when you're in that pattern, you can't get to that space of hope and dreaming that you mentioned. So we need to break free from that. And there's ways to do that that are gentle, that take you to the next level. And it's interesting. I've had clients say, well, what if I'm in therapy? Awesome. Let's celebrate that, right? But that's a different skill set. There are ways that these things work together.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the most important elements when you're looking at the person as a whole. Just like
So can you
any,
dig into that?
oh, yeah.
Sorry. So can you dig into that just a little bit more of the separation, but also the cooperation of therapy and the personal development and professional development that you're talking about? Like, what's the line in your mind, and then how do those two things work together?
Mm. So therapy is kind of an excavation of what's been going on and doing the work to heal, right? There's actively healing. And different types of therapy offer ways to move forward. Like cognitive behavioral therapy is often about moving forward versus talk therapy, which is looking backwards. But there is a lot of reflection and analyzing of what your past has been. In this space, it's moving forward, recognizing what's going on within you. It might connect you to a thought, a feeling, experience, and that's okay. And how do we soothe that? This is about self responsibility, self soothing, and empowerment. Just like anything in a business strategy, you're not just going to use one tactic. You're not just going to have one person do everything for you. That's why you need a team to look at the whole.
Mhm. It sounds very similar to something my wife and I are passionate about. We kind of describe it as getting to zero versus getting beyond zero. Like my wife is hugely passionate about helping people heal and helping people be able to heal through the wounds of their past so that they can experience peace, so that they can experience joy, so that they can experience thriving, and they're out of that survival mentality when it comes to healing or chronic illness or PTSD, that sort of thing. And for myself, I'm very passionate about what comes after. Like let's talk about what comes after you get to a point, and zero means like getting to neutral.
Mhm.
Like you've got to a point where, as if all of those traumatic events or difficult situations, as if they didn't happen, you've gotten to a point in your psyche, in your wiring, in your biology, all of this, where now at a point where nothing's holding you back. But that's not the same as growing. And you need both because we've all been through stuff. But what you're talking about is there's a difference between getting beyond all of the difficult things that you've been through, healing through them, rewiring your brain to be more beneficial. And then, like, okay, great. It doesn't stop there. How do you then take that to the horizon?
Exactly. Exactly. It's the forward momentum. It's the actual possibility. And, when I was in therapy, I was in therapy consistently for 15 years. It was a choice that I made that I thought, this is great support for me. And it was. And I'm so grateful for it. I didn't know that the work that I do was even available. I never worked for companies that invested in it, or at least gave me the opportunity to do that. So, had I known, wow, what could have I done in those spaces? My head would have been completely different. So much innovation could have happened, so much possibility. And also, angst that happened in the moment could have been eased a lot quicker.
Yeah. My wife and I have been through a lot of marital healing over the years, and most of it's not stuff that happened during the marriage. It's more of like childhood trauma and everything that affected our marriage that have had to work through. And we I have often had this experience where we talk about, like, when we're going through a difficult moment in our current state in our where we are now, and then sometimes you'll get the thought of, oh, back when things were good, or back when the honeymoon stage and all that. And
Mm,
honestly, I don't think about it that way, because I have seen the amount of growth that I've been through in the last years, coming up on 7. And I know that if I went back there today, with the healing, with the maturity, with the growth that I've been through, if I went back there today, it would have been so different.
yeah.
But the marriage that I experience now, even with the ups and downs and the difficulties and all that, I would never trade what I have now for what I started with, even during the honeymoon phase and all of that. Because, like you said, the amount of angst that I went through back then, just because I didn't know, and because I hadn't been through the healing, I hadn't been through the maturing, I hadn't done all the growth, all of that. Yes, it was fun in certain ways, more fun in the beginning, but it wasn't nearly as good because of what I've grown through, and where we've gotten now. It's so much better.
Mm.
There's more peace. There's more ability to enjoy the moment. There's more ability to address something constructively versus destructively. And yeah, it's the amount of angst, like you said, is totally different after having gone through that growth, after having gone through first the healing and then the growth.
And isn't that beautiful? What a testament to the work the two of you have done. and the strength of your marriage. I know my husband and I, similarly, we do the work. We've gone to couples counseling. And even last night, we were reflecting on our wedding and how we were both under this pressure to care for everyone else, that we were always on. We weren't giving ourselves the time. We didn't get to be as present as we would have wanted to be. And what it would look like today. I mean, this was our wedding day. It was a beautiful, wonderful celebration, right? But who we were then doesn't compare to who we've grown into. So, no, I don't want to go backwards. Let's keep going forwards with all of this. And isn't it interesting how you could probably think back to those moments and still feel that angst somewhere, have that memory, that thought of what came up in that moment. And you think, oh, how did I ever think like that? But it lives within you.
Absolutely. And we've definitely experienced that ourselves, where looking back, things that we did then that right now makes no sense. Even though it made perfect sense back then, we've always been very intentional about what we've done. But now I look back and it's like, why exactly did we do that? That doesn't make sense. But I want to zero in a little bit more on your work with these companies and organizations. And you mentioned therapy as kind of I don't know if adjunct is the right word, but like a cooperative partner in a way to your work. And I want to dig into that a little bit more, because what you're doing is essentially helping people to look at their lives and optimize it, streamline it, take it to the next level so that they're able to both accomplish what they consider as success and do it in a way that is conducive to wellness, conducive to actually experiencing that success in a way that they could look back on with both pride and joy. And there has to be a lot of different elements of their life that you're bringing into this. And I want to understand a little bit more of who else, what other types of disciplines, what other types of partnerships do you develop in your work, whether it be therapists or therapy as a practice, or whether it be other, I don't know, dietitians. Who do you work with, or who would you work with if you had the opportunity to really kind of take your clients to the next level?
Yeah. Wow. If I had the chance to do that most collaboratively, in addition to therapists, I think functional medicine doctors would be incredible. Healers.
Occupational therapy comes to mind.
Yeah. Uh, when I think about healers, I tend to think about energy healers. And for me, the clients that I work with, typically that would maybe be their next step. They might not be there yet, but I always think if it feels good, that's a great way to go because there's so much beauty in that. The commitment to using employee retreats or um, incentive trips at immersive wellness resorts,
Mm.
that ability to go and take 3 to 7 days where you're actually understanding what rest looks and feels like is extraordinary. And I even think just the testing of what they experience physically. You're a traditional doctor, whatever that specialty might be, whatever that ailment that person is going through, doing before and after testing is important. These are things that studies have been done with the work that I do to show these differences. But I think for the person themselves, just having the whole picture is great because when you go to the doctor, you're getting recommendations, but you might not be following all of them. Most people look for the pill. I'm going through this right now with my bonus daughter. And just last night, she says, "Isn't it amazing? This pill changed everything." I'm like, no, no, it wasn't just the pill. And I'm not anti-medication. I'm pro. But what I'm saying is for the right person, for what they need, these things don't work in a silo. There's a
Mhm.
reason that recommendations are, the doctor recommends take this pill, also consider this vitamin, shift and look at what you're eating instead, right? So a nutritionist to come in. All of these things play together and support the other, but they're not going to hold you accountable for all of that. Number one, the system isn't designed, it doesn't allow them the time to even sit with you and ask those questions and follow up with you in that way. But that's where your other professionals come in.
You are a whole person. And while medication is a part of the picture, and it might be a very important part in the beginning, the goal is to treat the whole person to the point where you don't need the medication.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's actually a huge part of my wife's book, and our upcoming keynote speaking series is about that, where when she was in the beginning of her healing journey, where she was dealing with chronic fatigue and complex post-traumatic stress disorder and all of that, and her basically her body was rebelling against her, in bed 23 hours a day. The 24th hour was usually with a doctor.
Mm,
And almost every doctor that she talked to had this mentality of, well, this is just the way your brain works. Take this pill and this is your life. And again, it's not saying that medication is bad. It's not saying even those doctors were bad. Maybe they just were unaware or didn't understand some of their other options. But there's so much beyond that. And when it's necessary, absolutely go with that. But then understand that it's meant to be temporary. There are other things that you can do to begin changing that to where it's no longer necessary and your life is better just on like supporting itself rather than having to use the temporary medication.
absolutely. And what I'll say, in on top of that, I mentioned I live with depression, anxiety, and CPTSD. For me, the medication has continued to be a necessity. However, the medication alone does not support my daily wellness. I can still experience anxiety. I can still potentially end up in a panic attack. I
Mm,
can still have lows. And if it wasn't for my own holistic practices, I'd be in bed. We wouldn't be having this
mm,
conversation right now. And that is that extra piece of effort and collaboration. So I love the
agree.
intent of what you and your wife are working on, and what her book sounds phenomenal. I'm excited to add it to my wish list.
Yes. Right there.
Yay.
Heal or die.
Ooh,
Um,
I love that.
yes, absolutely. And that, I think that title summarizes her approach. I've never met someone so committed to her own, like taking it into her own hands and like, we're going to do this and we are going to, and it both comes from kind of the dark side of that's where she was.
Mm,
That was where her choice was, like either I take this to the next level. And for her, it started out with a spiritual leading. But it was having to take it to the next level or go the other way. But it really kind of came to define the person that I met and later married is someone who is absolutely committed to pursuing her welfare and the welfare of those around her. And it's beautiful. Her story is beautiful. Obviously, the book encapsulates that. But yes, it is the idea of bringing in all of these different people, bringing in these different disciplines, and starting on an individual level. You are a whole person with all these different systems that are going on inside you, your life, like the things that are on externally, your relationships, your finances, how like the toxin level of the different things that you're surrounded by, and then internally everything that's going on in your biochemistry, everything that's going on in your brain chemistry, everything that's going on in your diet, it's all connected.
mhm,
And one of the really difficult things that people who deal with complex illnesses like CPTSD is that it is a complex issue. You have all these different systems that are feeding off of each other, whether positively or negatively. But the American health and wellness system isn't really geared for that. It makes sense to me to think of it like you are an integrated person. We should be having an integrated health and wellness and human services system. But because of the history and because of the way things have developed, we've been very siloed into expertise
mhm,
areas. And that's absolutely amazing. I think being able to specialize and focus is beautiful. The problem is when you specialize to the point where you're ignorant of everything around you,
mhm.
then that leads to a problem for your clients because they aren't an individual silo that you're dealing with. They are a whole person. And so what you're talking about in your dealing with these organizations is hoping to bring in those other people, like you mentioned therapy, you mentioned healers, energy healers, and we talked about dietitians and all of that. So I think it would be lovely to see that, and especially like I said, my personal passion is taking it to the next level and what you're doing, optimizing the entire system on an organizational level, teaching people how to do that and take it to the next level. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm in love with what I do. And one of the things that brings me joy is being able to see that whole person and recognize their life that got them to where they are, to why they're thinking a certain way, their cultural background, having space and care for it and understanding and showing them a new way. What I look at when I think of this work is giving them the rule book that we were never given, the door that was invisible. That's what we're opening.
And you are essentially painting a picture of what is beyond their current horizon. This is what's possible for them, even though they might not see it or might not even be able to understand why it's important right now. But what you're going in there, and it's kind of, I imagine it. I have a huge science fiction fantasy hobby. I love reading all of that stuff, but it almost is the role of a prophet in a way. Like you're going in and saying, here's what the future could look like if you take these steps, and I love it. It brings to mind not the science fiction side of things, but there's a couple of people that I actually would love to point you towards. One has been on this podcast, and the other is not, because I feel like they might actually be good collaborations for your specific area. And one is called Brain Gauge. There's a person who's been on this podcast, and he's developed a software and a hardware that would actually be really good. And he's essentially developed a way to measure and improve brain function using tactile feedback. And it looks like a computer mouse that you plug into your computer, and it comes with software and all that. And it uses the thing that makes it different about these brain training functions is, one, it doesn't rely on, it doesn't, isn't affected by internet speed. Like a lot of these, like go online and take these tests and see how high your IQ is, or see test your brain function, all that stuff. A lot of those things are affected by your bandwidth on your computer, and so that it doesn't get an accurate measurement, and so it
Mm.
messes with your results. But this one it's all local, and it doesn't. The other thing that makes it different is that it doesn't require you to think cognitively about what's happening. It doesn't require you to answer questions. All of this, it's entirely based off of feedback on your hand. You're getting like these pulses in your hand, and your wrist doing reaction time. They have games, all this stuff, but they've seen amazing results both in the training, but also accuracy in measuring someone's ability to function. And my thought for that just being how being able to show someone measurable results
Hmm.
based off of your program before and after, that sort of thing. Like I'm thinking maybe 2 months down the road or whatever, after having practiced these things, doing a before and after, or even just doing a here's where you are compared to where your peers are. I feel like that would be an amazing possible partnership
That's really
for
cool.
you guys. And the other one is I have not interviewed them, so I've only had the conversation with them at a conference, but they're called Heart Math.
Oh, yeah.
And what they do, you're aware of Heart Math.
Yes.
Okay, so for those of you viewers who are not aware, it's essentially they have well, think of it like a smartwatch type of thing, but they are able to sense use the rate of your heart as kind of a meter for your emotions. And especially this is great for people who are a little bit less in tune with everything that's going on inside. People like myself who might deal with like ASD. I have ASD, and like I'm not always the best tuned into what's going on in my own body. And then in other situations, people who in the corporate space or whatever, or the military space, who they've been taught to just go, 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 and they've kind of they're not as tuned in. They haven't practiced being tuned into what's going on in their own heart and their emotions and all that stuff. And so the example the guy gave me was basically having this person put it on and then think about puppies, and then watching the numbers change. And what he essentially is doing with heart math is making it accessible, making wellness and meditation and mindfulness practices accessible to people who wouldn't typically go that route. And I thought of you for both of those things. I feel like it would, for the people that you work with, those two things might be a really great partnership down
A-
the road.
Absolutely. One of the things that I tend to do is bring in the facts, the logic, a bit of the neuroscience, because of the fact that I recognize my clients feel better when they understand what's happening and why you would do this in the first place, and make sure that it can align with who they feel they are and where they're going, and maybe the reputation that they want to have professionally. So I
Hmm.
think that those two, brain gauge and heart math, sound exciting to speak to.
Hmm. I love it. And again, along the lines of partnerships and collaboration, I think this would just be a really cool thing to see you three together. Even maybe on a future podcast, I'll have invite you guys and have you all talk about that.
I love it.
But I wanted to go back a little bit to the measurable results, specifically not on the brain gauge side of things, but on the innovation. One of the
Mm,
things that I've noticed about myself, and I've seen, is what Mark. I think his first name is Mark Huberman. He's been interviewed a lot on some of the major podcasts as a brain scientist and wellness scientist, but talks about something that I've very much experienced is the connection between essentially boredom is what he calls it, but being at rest
mm,
and the ability to innovate and think and create and develop these things. And the the idea of rest is usually connected, in my experience, with just being able to perform your job, as in I'm able to show up and press the right buttons and do the right things at just kind of at a level I'm able to sustain my performance. But what I haven't heard people talk a lot about is the connection between resting and the ability to create new things, the ability to take what you're doing to the next level.
mm,
And when I know for myself, when I take time away from my phone, for example, and stop the doom scrolling and all of this stuff within 6 hours, if I've intentionally stayed away from it for like 6 hours, ideas just start coming
mm,
and ways of like, this is what I could do with my company. And here's who I can invite next. And here's how the new system I could build. And all of this stuff starts happening. And I feel like that's a really important thing to bring up to these, especially when they're leaders or burgeoning leaders in a company, because the ability to not only maintain a certain level of cognitive function, but to be able to take that to the next level is integrally, if I'm making up a word, forgive me, connected to the ability to rest, which is a core element of wellness, which is what you're bringing to them.
yes. Oh, so much yes to that. I love how you've gotten it down to 6 hours. I got this. And I would say one of the key things that we do is we look at, how are you resting? What do you consider rest? And understanding that for some people, it's going to look different. Like, yes, off the device, off the doom scroll, but what is it that energizes you in a restful way? Right. So maybe it's integrating a level of play. Are you going for a walk? Are you going to color? Would it help to window shop so that you can see things? I know for me, I love to read. And when I learn things, it opens my mind to other possibilities and I start to get ideas. I also love docu-series and documentaries. Again, they help me. That's restful for me to sit and learn. And that springboards into what could come next. It is amazing taking the time to do that intentionally and to not be on multiple screens. Don't do the second screening. Do something, just the one thing, just do that without distraction. And training yourself to do that, allowing that presence, also helps in this long term feeling, this chance, this possibility, this innovation.
And it can be a little bit painful at first. this is this is hard. I want to pick up my phone. I want to go do the thing. My wife and I are doing a dopamine cleanse for our daughter who is struggling with a little bit of ADHD right now,
Mm,
but it's been just kind of amazing to watch brain chemistry in action
mm,
when my wife is the biologist, so I'm learning from her and all this, but learning the difference between, for example, pursuing dopamine, but what you really need is oxytocin, which
mm,
is you're pursuing that the hit, the high, the excitement, But what you actually need, or I should say a better solution right now, would be to pursue oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical, as I understand it. And so when my daughter is going like, can I have this? Can I have this? Can we go do this? Can you buy me this? Can we go to that? And just pulling her into a hug,
Mm.
and let's give you something else that would give you what you need right now in a way that is more sustainable.
I love that. You just taught me something, and I'm so grateful for it. We also have that in our home, and it is a constant learning and
It has been
unlearning.
it has been a difficult process. It's been a couple months now, and we have definitely had our moments of storming off because I can't deal with this anymore. But my wife has done really well about understanding what's going on biochemically behind the
Mm,
scenes and working to give her what she needs in a way that we can sustain,
mhm,
in a way that will heal her from the essentially the addiction that has happened, where it's like dopamine, like let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
mhm,
And there's reasons behind all that, stuff that she's been through that has led to that type of brain chemistry pursuit. And we're working to deal with those things as well, child
mm,
therapist and all that stuff. But it's not just for a 5-year-old. It's for an adult. It's for someone who works in corporate, someone who
mm,
is an adult partner. I mean, this is something that my wife and I are learning ourselves in how to handle. And it's something that I'm very thankful for, that my wife and I have developed a practice of giving each other a break.
mm,
And even though we both work from home, we're both building this company, all this stuff, and our child is homeschooled. So everyone's here. That doesn't mean that you don't need a day off. And so we have organized our life where we are able to give each other a full day to
mm,
go be an individual away from the family and kind of invest in yourself that way. But it is difficult. And even just taking 6 hours to yourself in a week, a lot of, especially parents, find it very difficult. And that's why I want to clue in on that a little bit, is whether you are simply trying to do this in your family and you are working with a partner, or whether you are in corporate and you are on call 24/7, because we all have phones, and work-life balance is definitely an art. But how do people say no, not to the wants of other people, but to the needs of other people,
mm,
in order to take care of themselves? Because it's one level of autonomy and wellness and self discipline, self responsibility, whatever you want to call it, to be able to say no to what other people want from you. But it's entirely new level to say no to when there's an actual deadline approaching, or when there's people who are, hey, our tech is down again, our software is down again, and we need you. And I know it's midnight on a Saturday. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. It's a great question. Um, and I will tell you, actually, something I'm very excited about is I'm writing about this. I have a book
Hmm.
that's gonna be coming out later this year called Palatable, Profitable, and Dying Inside,
Hmm.
Why Success Shouldn't Require You to Disappear and the Fulfillment Formula That Brings You Back. And this is something that I talk about regularly throughout it because that's reality. We have to learn practices that can take us through our everyday life. And it's sometimes as simple as one breath at a time. When we start to make these small shifts, it becomes easier. So, for example, I spoke to breath. There are moments when wherever you are, you're going to hear something that just kind of sets you on fire, right? In that moment, pause and take 3 deep breaths. And it's almost like every time you can give yourself a clue. Whenever you're annoyed, do that. And it prevents you from reacting. It gives you this opportunity to come back into center. Like you talked about getting to level 0, right? It helps to do that. And the more and more that you do that, then you get to go above 0. You get to go towards calm, wisdom, boundary setting, but it's recognizing what's going on within you first. That's the process. That level of self awareness and action. And it doesn't have to be gigantic action. We really have to start small because if you try to change the world day one, you're likely going to have mad anxiety, buyer's remorse, all the things. It's little micro minutes, these actions every single day in your ordinary life that create ease. Because of the type of clients I work with and being in that same position prior, I know that we have to find ways to make this possible no matter where you are. I had a client who was trying to set aside 2 minutes to herself, and she had a relative there at her home who was knocking on her door during this 2 minutes. And she could not even say, please give me 2 minutes. She got up and went to help and answer and then just let the whole day unfold like that. So we had to do the work for her to feel comfortable and have the ease within her body and her nervous system to say, can you give me 2 minutes? And that's a boundary that might seem small to some, but it's not for others. And it's just honoring where you are in the journey and knowing that you can get there.
I love that for a couple different reasons. One, you talked about taking the breath and like starting small before you go try to fix the world. And Jordan Peterson has an analogy with that as well, where he talks about clean your room. And there's an element of that which is wellness, which is you have to start from a foundation of being mentally at peace and being mentally in charge of your own life before you start tackling bigger problems. And because there's a foundation that you need to build to be able to handle the bigger problems successfully and sustainably without it breaking you or breaking others. But then there's the other part of that, which is just taking a breath. And this is more of a personal thing for me, is I have dealt with those things before, where like not having a strong sense of boundaries, not having a strong understanding of what it means to own my own things and let someone else own their own. And there's almost there's a taking back of your power that can happen in those 3 breaths, especially in a heated moment when tempers have flared, arguments are happening, people have said mean things. And for you to just sit back and take those breaths, and especially 3 breaths before responding, I can imagine it being very difficult, especially when someone's sitting there staring at you, waiting for your response because they're like angry and all this stuff. And for you to just intentionally do that, I could see that being difficult, but I could also see it being so powerful,
I
where it is every breath that I take is my first no, in a way, as someone who has struggled with social anxiety and boundaries and all that stuff in my life.
mm,
It's the smallest way of, before I get in there, I am taking back my power. Before I
mm.
address anything you said, I am in charge of whether I say anything or not. And I am taking a breath. And there's an immense power that comes with that.
So much yes. I felt that really deeply, and you're absolutely right. Holding the space for yourself to even breathe can feel terrifying. You're supposed to fill the space, right? There's not supposed to be silence. And this gives you the time and appreciation of what pausing and silence can actually do for everyone involved. We're getting out of reaction, we're getting into response. So that's where it's key. This thinking about how we say this is the whole person, right? When you show up at work, you're not just the work bunny. Your whole life is with you. Who you are is going to be carrying with you. I often talk to clients about their life outside of work because that's impacting how they're showing up. And we go through how to have difficult conversations, but very different than you might find elsewhere because we're looking at how to do that inner work first to determine, is this conversation even necessary? What's happening within me with the conflict? And if it is necessary, what are some ways that I can approach it differently than I would have before I ever looked within because I'm just reacting from something that feels painful? but having a full understanding of it. When we think about those 3 breaths, some other things that I work with people on are some tactile ways, if it feels good, like rubbing 2 fingertips together or tracing, the fingertips and palm of one hand on the fingertips of the other. And when my husband and I have difficult talks, both of us will be doing one of those things because it's helping to keep us regulated. And I always recommend that when walking into a talk that gives you some sort of, whether it's anxiety or just that angst, anticipation that you're not excited about, the talk that you're not excited about, to make sure that you're staying regulated through the whole thing. You have the ability to do that, and that's really powerful.
I love that. Taking a breath, taking 3 breaths before you talk. And you mentioned how you and your husband will often be doing those grounding techniques, is essentially what they are in the middle of a conversation. And I love the awareness. What's the right word? You and your husband giving each other space to do that in the middle of a conversation, because it can feel vulnerable, especially if the other person knows what you're doing. It can feel vulnerable and almost like, in a way, I can imagine it feeling like you're losing the argument because you're showing the other person that you're dysregulated or that you're afraid or whatever. And there's definitely a mindset shift that needs to happen for both parties, in that obviously one person can do that kind of surreptitiously or whatever if they need to. Someone who that I wanted to bring into this conversation is Jefferson Fisher, is a lawyer who's made a name for himself on YouTube or TikTok lately, just giving advice about how to handle difficult situations, difficult people, all this stuff. And he talks about a couple different things. One, he says, let breath be your first word. And before you say anything, take a breath. And there's another thing that he talks about where for him, because when he's in a situation where he's literally negotiating, arguing, all this stuff with someone who's trying to win, like he's on the other side of it, another lawyer, another party, all this stuff, and he can't show them that he's anxious or whatever, or that he's upset, that he's angry or whatever. Like the first person to show that kind of emotionally in some of those situations feel like they're giving ground. For him, like he squeezes his toes in his shoes. He does that in his shoes because no one can see that. It's under the table, it's inside your shoes, no one can see that. But like he uses that tension, the adrenaline that's pumping, like he releases it in a way that people can't see. So there are ways of doing that when you perhaps don't feel safe. But I also want to recognize what you and your husband have built, which is, it sounds like you allow each other to do that without it undermining the argument, undermining the conversation.
First of all, I'm so excited to hear about what that attorney is speaking to. That's so beautiful. And that toe squeezing, it's one of my favorite things, that tightening your muscles and releasing them. And I love that way of do this in your feet, right? Nobody's going to notice when that's happening. It's actually one of the few things that I have seen tied to supporting the rewiring of the brain for CPTSD, is that particular exercise of tensing your muscles and releasing them. So it is such an amazing thing. I talk about it a lot with anxiety, because when you are in a high level of anxiety, using that, it's like the one thing that'll help you feel and create some change within. So it's such a beautiful technique. Thank you for those kind words about how my husband and I handle those situations. It's interesting to hear that it would maybe feel vulnerable. From my side of the couch, it looks like my mind, the negative noise starts to spin. What have I said that makes him upset? Oh my gosh. And then I have to stop myself. I have to catch that and go, no, he just loves me enough that he wants to stay calm. He loves me enough to do that. And you know what? I'm really happy for him. And he's not looking at me thinking, what is I saying that's doing that to her? He's happy that I'm taking care of myself. It is our way of taking care of ourselves as individuals and taking care of our marriage.
And that is a beautiful position to have, and a beautiful relationship to have cultivated around that. But I also want to recognize, for the people perhaps that you would be coaching in the C-suite situation, I could definitely see where they might need to they might need to employ some of those undercover grounding mechanisms because they're in a boardroom, whether it's a boss trying to deal with an employee, but trying not to like go off on them because like they've told you this 10 times and trying to be patient, or whether it's in negotiation with another company, a merger or something like that. Like
Mhm.
there are situations where you would be in a very similar position as that attorney. And so I could see both of those being very powerful. You want to develop your personal relationships in a way that you can do what you and your husband are doing. But then you're also in a situation where you have to develop those other techniques where you can do this even out and about or with people who you don't have that relationship.
Exactly.
So you have some really amazing wisdom in this. And I really appreciate how you bring those things together, not only for the individual level, but also for the corporate level, for the organization, because what you're doing is not just on the individual level, but it also builds towards a culture. When you train the leaders in these wellness practices, in these mindfulness, in some cases, in these emotional intelligence areas, the leaders of an organization set the culture for that organization. So by proxy, you're not just helping the leaders, you're helping everyone who works for them. And I want to recognize that because you're making everyone who works in corporate, you're making all of their lives better. So
Thank you.
thank you for the wisdom that you've brought to this podcast, to our listeners, to the individual, for the family, for the people who work in the C-suite or the everyday job. Thank you. And also thank you for making a real difference in the world because, like I said, what you're doing is not just helping the individuals, you're helping everyone they lead and everyone they will ever encounter in the future. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate you, Red. That means so much. And I take those words in fully and gratefully.
Thank you so much for your time. I've had an amazing conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to check out our next episode here and use the comments to ask any questions or suggest any future topics. If this episode was helpful to you and you want to support our mission to improve U.S. healthcare and win the war on complex illness, you can donate any amount using the following QR code or the link in the description. As always, like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who would benefit from it. See you next time.